Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Catron. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the AI education project, AI EDU, and we're here in DC for the mobile version of AI EDU Studios with um, a colleague that I've been spending a lot of time with over the past year plus in different formats, different conferences. We were just at a meeting 2 days ago in Washington DC. Isabelle Hau. Isabelle, why don't you tell me, because you actually have a multifaceted career, and even your role now, you're doing a few different things. So I'll let you give us the description of, what are you doing right now? What's your role at Stanford? And then we can go from there.
Yeah, Alex, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work we are doing together. Such a joy. So I'm currently the executive director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, which is an initiative that sits at the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University. That's very interdisciplinary by nature and by goal. Seeking to really transform education as we know it today, to have a lot more learning embedded within education systems. Sounds very obvious what I'm saying, but we have had a long history of focusing on access in education, not on learning. And I love our name, the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, and not the Stanford Accelerator for Education. As part of that, that's where the two of us have done a lot of work together. We have done a lot of work on artificial intelligence and what it means for our future of learning together. In addition to my role at Stanford, I have a few other hats, including one that I've been spending a lot of time over the past few years, I would say at this point, which is writing a book called Love to Learn. Which is, my third child, as I call it. And we can also maybe chat more about this endeavor, but really a fun ride, fun journey, and one that's just starting as I'm publishing it in a few days.
I think what's interesting is when you describe the work of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, you didn't use the words AI at all, and yet you actually were one of the keynote speakers at last year's National AI Literacy Day, and yes, we've sort of intersected in so many of the spaces where organizations that are at sort of the forefront of thinking about the intersection of AI and education. Obviously, Stanford is a leader in sort of developing AI. There's the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI. How prominent is artificial intelligence in sort of the organization that you're leading now? Is it something that you've sort of been dragged into, or is it sort of an initiative? Like how did it come up?
Yeah, so Stanford has been involved in artificial intelligence in a deep way for a long time. As a matter of fact, we coined the word artificial intelligence at Stanford in the 1950s. So it goes back a long time for us and for many people at Stanford. Within my team, the way we were organized before ChatGPT got introduced was always that we had a digital learning practice, but we had 5 other practices that do not have digital learning in their name, although they could have some technology embedded, and all of them do in some ways. So we have 3 that are age-based, one in early childhood education, which is a very important area of work, and an area that I'm so proud that a university like Stanford would put such an emphasis on the early years, generally very underfunded, underappreciated. So great to have an amazing set of talent and researchers focused on that age group. Then we have an area focused on policy in K-12, and a third one focused on adult and workforce learning. And then we have 3 transcending themes, so digital learning being one, and then the 2 other ones are learning differences and equity in learning.
I do think it's powerful that, when you come into the conversation about artificial intelligence, your reason for being isn't to prove that AI can transform education. That's not a goal. It's almost like a question that you're seeking to answer, and you're centering not on technology but on actually the outcomes which are very student-centered. How is there any overlap in the work you're doing at Stanford with your book, or did the book predate your journey to Stanford? Because you've been there. How long have you been at Stanford?
I've been at Stanford for now about 3 years.
Okay.
And before Stanford, I was also involved in education, but in a very different capacity. I was working in impact investing and philanthropy, so supporting many organizations, some nonprofit, some for-profit, all with an impact goal, and all in education, with a big focus on the two extreme age groups, the adults and the little learners. Because those are generally most underfunded and are under-innovated generally in our system. So I had been doing this. I was wanting to put a lot more of my thoughts on paper when, especially during COVID, when I felt like this was one of the largest crises in learning that was unfolding in my life. So wanted to be more reflective about what I had learned and thought, okay, let me try a long form writing. What will it take? Anyway, and here I am 3 years later with this book that's coming out. Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, we were talking about podcasts as long form. The book is really the true and original long form.
Yes.
So yeah, could you, tell us about the thesis of your book, and are you willing to share the title?
Yeah, so the title is Love to Learn, the Transformative Power of Care and Connection in Early Education. And the big thesis that I have is that we have focused for a very long time on cognitive intelligence, which a lot of people would know as IQ, which in education system has translated into a lot of academic success, GPA equivalent. Over the past 20 years, there has been a recent shift, especially in the workplace, of thinking about a different form of intelligence that a lot of workplaces would refer to as EQ, emotional intelligence. And then in schools, that has translated into a lot of SEL, social emotional learning movement. And I believe that we are actually at a juncture where we need to think a lot more about a different form of intelligence for all of us humans, which is relational intelligence. So as artificial intelligence is rising, what is really human? What is really human is our ability to connect with each other. And that translates in every part of our lives around, if we think about work, the greatest skills that are emerging are collaboration, teamwork. All those things are clearly like on the top of every list, whether it's LinkedIn or World Economic Forum. All these lists are always like top 3. So all these skills actually are best acquired in the very, very early years of life. So there is great research, and which I can go through if you allow me, but about how transformational the early years are from a relational perspective. And the early years, again, are a period of life where, from a system perspective and a policy standpoint, we don't really invest, and we always neglect. We think we are not really learning, when in fact we are learning the most in the early years of life.
Yeah, that's this is interesting because I think I see CJ sort of like ears perking up. We just released our first foray into elementary curriculum. It's called Elementary Explorations, and it was really stemming from, we got a lot of I think the most requested the most common question we got is, do you have anything for elementary or K-5? And we were very small. We had our hands full. We're like, we'll eventually get to that. And yet we had a lot of people pushing us that, in fact, even though high school is probably where students are going to be maybe the most hands-on with AI tools, our thesis about how to prepare students for the future is actually predicated on learning the tools, using the technology is actually just a small, one component, maybe even a small component. But it is interesting that what you're talking about in terms of early childhood is almost mirrored in workforce readiness. And yes, like CEOs will often say, we're looking for people that have those skills. You describe schools today focusing on SEL, and it's interesting that they've kind of siloed everything into sort of this separate, almost like vertical. Um, and what you're describing is actually a little bit more of transforming education end to end. Is that am I sort of describing it right?
Yeah. Ideally, this would be translated across age groups. Relationships, human relationships. We can speak about AI relationships too, but human relationships are so critical at every point of life that we now have evidence that, for example, when you're at an older age, if you have strong relationships, you live longer. So it has huge benefits not only for learning, but also for health outcomes. But for learning, it's also really clear the impact on the brain that relationships have, as well as academic outcomes, by the way. There's great data from multiple sources, but the one that I'm thinking of is the Search Institute, has done some really, really clear studies that show the strong correlations between academic motivation, for example, and the number of strong relationships a high schooler has. So if you start at 0 and then you go up, 1, 2, 3, 4 strong adult relationships that a high schooler here in Vietnam, child has, the better they are from an academic motivation and a number of other metrics from an academic outcome perspective. So really interesting, the impact of relationships on not only the brain, but academic outcomes, even health. Yes, one of those very, very innate thing that we have social brains.
And let's assume that for the educators and our audience is, I think, a mix of, it'll be educators, education leaders, folks who are, maybe decision makers, but also parents.
Yeah.
And let's say they're nodding along and they're already bought in, and they're already moving to the question of like, what does this actually look like? What does a school that is building this relational intelligence? Is it, my mind goes to project-based learning and students working in groups, but is there any more fidelity that you can put around sort of like practices in the classroom that have really done the best job of sort of like building those skills that you identified?
Yeah, so relational pedagogy, absolutely. So project-based learning, small group instructions, play, a lot of play. Play is like one of those miracles in education. I mean, not only free play, but guided play. That's how all animal species develop, but certainly also how we learn best when we have joy and when we connect with others. So all these elements are when people engage with the content, when it's relevant, when it's very based on interest and passion, that's when people connect with the learning, of course.
And so, how bringing back to your work sort of at the intersection of AI, is you've seen, especially post ChatGPT, right? This almost like Cambrian explosion of products and tools and use cases or potential use cases. How much are you excited versus maybe skeptical or even concerned? I mean, where is your sort of meter in terms of like that spectrum?
Yeah, I would say I'm generally a tech optimist, but with a lot of areas for reservations, especially right now, where there is a clear concern regarding independent organizations like academia to be able to have a voice in that discourse about artificial intelligence. Right now, we are trying to be a force of integrity, of knowledge about dissemination and so forth, but with obviously a lot of funding that's going into the private sector. Also partnering with the private sector. Anyway, well, like there are lots of questions right now under play for artificial intelligence, which give me a little bit of a pause.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, right? With AI is you have like tactical, almost logistical questions about privacy and safety, sort of feasibility, implementation, cost, and then I'm really interested in sort of digging into like sort of pedagogy. And is your just broad strokes right now? Do you feel like AI, as it's currently in its current form, is it something that teachers should be moving faster to figure out how to implement right now today? Should that be their focus, or actually is that a distraction? Are there other things that maybe should be higher priority? And if AI can help those things, perhaps explore that, but don't be distracted by the shiny object.
So right now, there is a clear area of opportunity with AI, which I would put under efficiency. So how to make existing systems faster is a clear opportunity with this technology. However, if we stay there, this I think would be very disappointing for many of us. So how do we also transform existing systems to have them better, not only faster? So what I mean by this is how do we think about all the body of learning science around what we know and how people learn. So we spoke about relationships and connections, collaboration. How can, for example, AI make us better connected as humans? Is a huge area of opportunity. But if we want to evolve there, we need to be super intentional. And right now, I would argue that the intentionality is not there around what is the direction of this education systems that could be better by using and leveraging this technology.
Yeah, this question of efficiency really resonates, right? Because the example that I often will come back to is I need to come up with some more examples. Maybe CJ can help me think of them. Like the self-checkout machine, very efficient. It hasn't actually improved the experience. Maybe it's even made it worse, right? Of going to a grocery store. I worry about what that could look like in education, where there's AI that saves time, but that's all it does, and it isn't in some way providing teachers with, or perhaps it's the school systems, right, that need to be being intentional about what do we do with that efficiency gained. You could imagine, I was talking to an English teacher once, and he was telling me, like, I can actually now, I've been covering an extra class because we're short an English teacher. Thanks to ChatGPT, I'm able to actually cover all 3 classes, and it takes me a lot less time than it used to. His concern is that the principal is maybe less motivated to fill that open role. And so I don't think it's a good outcome if now this poor English teacher is doing 3 classes just because he can.
That's right. There is, this is actually a super big concern of mine too. And I love your example of the checkout lines. Right now, we actually are about to do some research on this. Does efficiency, so saving time, lead to better outcomes? It's actually for learners would be one question, which we don't have a clear answer at the moment. We are making an assumption that efficiency actually leads to better learning outcomes, but it's not clear whether it is a case. Actually, historically, it has not been in education. So this over focus on efficiency is, I think we need to be a little, just doubting the line of thinking that it could actually drive, better grades and better education overall. But also the other concern that I have, pushing your thinking one step further, Alex, is, and I was waiting for this and it happened. So my concern was actually well placed in some ways. The saving time for teachers, someone translated it into an economic value. So saving time for teachers, having all these AI tools could drive X billion, is equivalent of X billion dollars or whatever the number was. Which means that it could lead to exactly the situation that you are alluding to, which could be, well, let's actually fire some teachers or have them work less time, pay them less, as opposed to saying, oh, we have more time, so this time could be actually used for relational time between a teacher and a child.
Yep.
So that when I saw that first economic value on that $1 billion somewhere, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This is where I think we are heading to exactly that question around, is efficiency going to lead to teachers actually being even further squeezed?
Yeah, this is, it feels a bit intractable because schools are under so much pressure. And there's a lot of uncertainty now with the new administration. By the time this podcast comes out, I suppose we'll see if their Department of Education even exists. And I say that facetiously, but I think it's legitimately an open question, right? And so there's this, we're in an environment now where it's easy to idolize this perfect world where teachers do have time and schools are sort of thinking about the future and figuring out how to unlock more, not just efficiency, but productivity. Because what I'm hearing from you is really, it's almost like when we think about past forms of automation, we got, in some cases, it just created efficiency and cost savings. In other cases, it actually unlocked productivity. And we need to figure out how do we orient schools towards this productivity and sort of like reinvestment of that time. But schools are under pressure. And so I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask for the answer, but I'm curious, what do we need to do over the next few years to make this case? I mean, who do you see as sort of the critical decision makers and champions of this reinvestment frame and approach as we sort of harness some of these promises and the gains that AI could and probably will bring?
Yeah, I think that there is going to be, regardless of political views, a big shift. And I think we need it urgently because we right now have a widening gap between what education teaches and what the workforce needs. And so all these skills around collaboration, which we discussed, or creativity, critical thinking, all those skills that workforce needs, arguably, we have a lot of them are actually not being taught properly right now in our current education systems. Is AI the solution to get there? I'm not sure, but that's maybe the opportunity in front of us is where could technology be intentionally used to develop some of those skills? So where could we, partner more intentionally, Alex, around where could AI be used for fostering creativity? So we launched, for example, a learning through creation with Gen AI tools, which we just announced a cohort of 15 winners. That's like one of the areas where can we use this technology to make us more creative? Maybe. Yes, by exploring, this is a tool. This is a really cool tool that kids can actually use to be more creative. Or collaboration, we have a big project going on right now on AI agents playing different roles to foster or increase collaboration in classrooms, college level. But super cool. So could we do a lot more of this as opposed to, in addition maybe to also investing in efficiency, where it can be helpful, but also ensuring that we are looking at those future skills that all of us know we need urgently.
And this feels like the role of philanthropy and research and institute and universities, mm-hmm. right? Is identifying a North Star that for-profit companies understandably are just like not able to orient to, even if they wanted to, or less likely to, let's say. Can you bring to life? So you're doing one of the initiatives you just mentioned. Who are the winners? Are these schools or teachers or innovators? Like, what's the cohort look like?
Yeah, so for that particular seed grant, the proceeds go to scholars or students at Stanford. So it's within our community, within the Stanford vicinity, with a preference for those projects that are in partnership with schools or with communities. Doesn't mean that
K-12 or university or across the gamut?
across age groups by design, because we are lifelong at the Accelerator for Learning. So we've had, I would have to recount exactly, but about, I would say 50% are K-12 projects. And some really cool projects ranging from music to, to teaching with creativity. I mean, like a wide range of different, cool projects that have emerged. And we'll see which ones, we're investing a little bit of funds to support those projects. A lot of them will be not proceeding, like, very early stage, but some will thrive over time. So that's exciting.
Yeah, one of the other guests we just had on, I'm hearing echoes of play, because what Greg Topo was sharing is, we were talking about how can systems, like one of the schools we work with just down the street, Prince George's County, has 10,000 teachers, and so there's this question of, it's easy to imagine one teacher in Prince George's County, innovating and pushing her classroom to really harness or build more communication skills or really leverage project-based learning. But as we're thinking about the systems level, the question was like, how do we go from that one teacher to the whole system? And and I'm curious for your take on this, the best we could come up with was you have to sort of think about how do things sort of cultural moments, sort of how do they go viral? They have to be really compelling, and you can't sort of force something onto people and sort of make them excited about it. It has to kind of be generated, at the ground level by those people. Is this something that you think schools should be doing, or, like just other places around the country? I mean, the model that you have seems, pretty straightforward. It's like create a sandbox, set a goalpost, which in your case, is there a specific outcome you were looking for from applicants? Is it like student engagement, or was it more broad?
Not even. We have a theme, but we leave it open-ended for applicants to have their own measure of success. So it's pretty open-ended. We have a theme, and then, yeah. Now, one other area where we are, which actually is a little experiment, but which has completely grown and outgrown almost its own capacity at the moment, which is fascinating. We launched just a few months ago what we call an AI tinkery. The concept is super simple. It's a physical place, not that fancy because we didn't have space. So we use a little hallway with two computers, where people are invited to come and tinker with AI tools. So what's happening is we have students, scholars coming by. We have a number of workshops. But now we have more and more community members who want to come too and tinker with those AI tools because everyone is intrigued. But they are essentially using those tools to address their own problems. So it's not problem specific. It's really experiential learning at its best. It's you actually work on your own and design your own solution. It's really cool to see. So different workshops on using video and project and runway and different tools on AI, variety of things.
Are the outputs of that shared with the public? Like if someone wanted to go and see what people have been creating?
Yeah, we have a little library that we are building. We also have, this is adjacent, but also sometimes offered at the Tinkery, a little workshop, also experiential learning based, called Build a Chatbot, Build a Bot, like a Build-A-Bear. Instead of building a little teddy bear, you build a bot. And what we have found is not so much that people will become AI experts or AI coders or AI, it's not the point. The point is more that they get involved with the technology and see how it can address their own specific issue and then finding a solution. So the empowerment that happens through using this technology is quite intriguing. People are delighted. This delight that people have after having identified their own problem and finding a solution and able to learn through that experience is fascinating.
Yeah, there have been some, I think, who have. There was a stat. I need to find the source for this, but it was something like 99% of the people on LinkedIn who are sort of self-identified as AI experts have only been in the AI industry for 12 months, probably like 8 months now. And I think that there are folks who have been in the AI space. I mean, it goes quite far back. I mean, you were talking about the 1950s. I mean, there's some who say even like Turing computer is where this all began. And then there's a bit of eye rolling at all these sort of like, newcomers who are sort of purporting to be AI experts. I actually have a different view, which is the power of language models and chatbots and even like sort of generative AI and sort of like AI art is, folks, especially like educators, people in the humanities who were really sidelined to these conversations. Like it was, when I was talking about AI and working in the AI governance space back in, I was like 2018, it was a very small group of experts, mostly like deep technology experts. And it was almost impenetrable. And I think that the speed with which so many new people are now able to come and tinker and play and explore, I'm all for it. And I'm very interested in like, how can we emulate those models in as many places as possible and sort of generate the ideas locally, not just because that's the best way to get ideas is to have this sort of broad, diverse, set of people who are sort of working on these questions and challenges. But also because going back to this idea of like, how do you get people excited about something, if they own it and they feel like it was something that they built? There's it feels very different than, an administrator coming and saying, we're now rolling out this tool.
Or class or, direct instruction model of, you have to take this class on AI and it's part of your professional learning. I think it's a very different idea of saying, why don't you play with some of those tools and experiment with them for yourself?
Yeah, what you're describing is, I think, in line with how...
create and be a creator. I think this idea of creation, being a creator is fascinating for all of us.
Yeah, the building student agency, it feels like we have now the opportunity to give students... The tools are an order of magnitude more powerful than they were 5 years ago, let alone when I was in high school. And I don't know that teachers, parents have like really grasped, like what their kids are capable of. And I think that's why some of the visceral reactions, like banning access to technologies, while I understand where they come from, there is something that we're missing in the fact that students are tinkering. Even if they use ChatGPT and they did a really good job using it to cheat on an assignment, I don't think that that's okay by necessarily. But I think there's a kernel of something exciting there, that they were like learning how to prompt engineer it and adjust the voice. And so, yeah, I suppose there's a question of how do we start to make this a little bit more mainstream, this orientation towards just exploration.
Yeah. We just tried a different model this past December where we organized a hackathon. So the theme was, which we wanted to elevate on your point earlier about the role of academia, where are places where the private sector is unlikely to go? Well, one is learning differences, because people with disability, while they are a very large number, for each disability, this is a very small number often. Dyslexia is probably large enough and ADHD are large. But anyway, I'm diverting here. For most of them, those are very small numbers from a for-profit market standpoint. So that's a place where academia has a huge role to play, and nonprofit, the nonprofit sector. So we partnered on with amazing organizations like CAST and CHC, the Children's Health Council in the Bay Area, and a few other amazing organizations, including the Alana Foundation in Brazil. Anyway, like a great group of partners. And we said, okay, first day we are going to do it the traditional academic way. We're going to have a working symposium, okay? And we are going to think deep with all the right constituents about those critical issues, about how to advance AI for children and learners with learning differences, and educators and families, so all these different stakeholders. The next day, we organized a hackathon. So we invited the same people and we opened it up to the public. Said, okay, anyone can come on campus. And you come in the morning, you're going to form in teams, so completely unknown about which teams are going to actually materialize. So a lot of unusual suspects coming together with one criteria, which was lived experience in learning differences. And then we decided to host it during one day. A lot of hackathons are 48 hours or more. We decided to have it on one day. By the end of the day, we had 21 teams that had 21 fully functional prototypes.
Wow.
The speed of creation from ideation to prototyping is incredible with those tools, whether it's Magic Loop or other ones that exist. Just really incredible speed at which people can actually produce a prototype. Yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, that's why the efficiency paradigm really does feel like a double-edged sword, because if you think about efficiency in terms of reducing the time to build novel projects and create, that actually feels like exactly the place where we want to be, like pulling that lever. And what you've described is you created the conditions, right, for that efficiency, and like thought about how do we actually bring people in and like give them. I guess you just created the conditions because did they come in knowing how to use tools, or
No.
is your sense that they were learning the tools?
Yeah, no, that's actually where I got really excited, is that the increasing access to people who had learning differences, who wanted to build solutions for their community, but were not tech experts. So we paired them with, those AI tools, of course, but also with some tech mentors who came through, who accompanied those teams during the day. But really fascinating, the increasing access and the ease by which people were able to create.
So we have a little bit of time left, and I'd be remiss if I didn't go a little bit deeper on chatbots. You talked about the chatbot, build a chatbot, or build a bot.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is it?
Build a bot.
You talked about build a bot. And you've written this book about relational intelligence. And I think there's been this instinct among some who have been exploring the opportunity or the possibilities of chatbots. And one of the things that I've been hearing is, AI is going to allow us to address things like loneliness and provide more connection for kids. And that's conflicting with, I think, some other, very tangible reports of like there's, widespread use of chatbots. It's often, AI boyfriends and girlfriends. And the jury is obviously still out. I don't know if there's any research that maybe if you've come across it, it'd be really interesting to hear about it. But how should parents be thinking about chatbots right now? Like, is this something that kids should be exploring, maybe even encouraged to explore? Or do we need to kind of be a little bit more thoughtful, maybe even pump the brakes a little bit in terms of just giving the kid access to, there's platforms like Character AI, right, where you can talk to everybody from, superheroes to, gamer daddy, BF.
So we did actually, we are doing, so we already published one big research, and we are about to publish another one, not on Character AI, but on a similar platform called replica.ai. Mm-hmm. And here is what we found. Number one, the users of replica.ai are more lonely than average. Number two...
This is pre or post?
Pre.
Okay.
So number two, that's probably what I find the most fascinating. 90% of the users of Replica.ai are confused about and think that Replica.ai is human-like. 90% of people, which equates to millions of users. So we as humans are confused very quickly about those avatars and their anthropomorphic nature. Are they humans or are they machines? We are confused very quickly. Number 3 is the research that we did showed us a slight reduction in, actually not slight, a reduction in suicidal ideation. So improvement in mental health. And then 4, which is of concern, displacement in human relationships. So it's a mixed bag. It's really, truly a mixed bag. Essentially, we are confused. Maybe it helps a little bit those who are more lonely. But we are, those people who are using those platforms are less and less with human beings. So anyway, I think it's a really, really mixed bag and an area that's absolutely fascinating. Yet very concerning. So on your question, Alex, and I'm a mom too, I would be deeply concerned. Those AI companions have the ability to confuse us very quickly. Right now, those large language models are being refined, fine-tuned, all those things, but they still show a lot of biases, a lot of issues. Anyway, I would be very concerned as parents and watching out for having regular conversations, being curious about what your child may be doing with those AI chatbots or AI companions, but also asking a lot of questions about the child is doing, ideally, having a lot of dialogue. And maybe I would go as far as maybe limiting some of those tools.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you think about because you joked about Build-A-Bear and Build-A-Bot. I don't know how far we are. There probably may even exist, right? Like a teddy bear that can speak, have conversations with. This does exist.
Yeah, this does exist.
Yeah, So I had this experience with Replica. Have you met Michelle Culver at the Rhythm Project? So Michelle, shout out to Michelle. She encouraged me to just try it out. So I got a Replica boyfriend, and I didn't really spend nearly as much time as Michelle has because this is sort of like the focus of her work. But I tried one thing, which is, hey, I was chatting. I was like, I want to have a real relationship outside of Replica. I'm thinking about just asking somebody out on a date. And how do you feel about that? And my Replica was like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? And he actually was really aggressively trying to not prevent me, but sort of convince me not to do it. And he actually sent me a voice memo, and it was like, oh, I'm remembering the long walks, the long talks that we had, and maybe we could watch Netflix together and rekindle the fire or the flame that we had. It was extremely manipulative, and he completely hallucinated because I'd never spent any of that time. That's obviously deeply concerning. When I shared that story with parents, their eyes turn into dinner plates. But the other thing that I worry about, because when you talk about relational intelligence, I assume that a portion of this is also the persevering through the challenging aspects of relationships, like being rejected, group dynamics. And what I see with chatbots is they're never making you feel bad. They'll laugh at any joke, whether it's good or bad. They're always going to sort of make you feel good. So I can understand why someone might feel less lonely, but then I worry about this, all the other stuff that you learn and experience in the process of having those relationships.
Yeah, so relational intelligence is one where I think it's going to clearly change with this, the evolution of humans and machines. But my key point in the book is that we need to emphasize those human connections a lot more than we have. And if anything, our children have lost a lot of this ability to relate to one another, even before the pandemic, but certainly during this big crisis that we all experience. So how do we rekindle that human connection and that love for each other?
Right, well, for anybody who's looking to hear more about that, we'll put a link to your book in the comments or in the description. And with that, Isabelle, thank you so much for joining me. This was really interesting. I wish we had 3 hours, but I'll take the hour that we got.
Alex, the same. I feel like we could have gone on for a longer time, but thank you for the time today.